What if the most dangerous employee in your company isn't the loud rebel, but the calm one you pushed into the shadows and forgot was holding everything together? The office was not just empty, it had been erased. When Elena Ward stepped off the elevator on the 22nd floor of Northvale Dynamics, the silence hit her before the sight did, thick and wrong, like a held breath that refused to release. She had returned from 3 days in Chicago feeling lighter than she had in months. The strategy summit had gone better than expected. Her division numbers were strong, deadlines met, risks contained. She had even secured approval for expanded training budgets. It was the kind of quiet win that never made headlines, but kept companies alive. Elena had allowed herself a rare moment of satisfaction as the elevator climbed. Then the doors opened. No keyboards. No low hum of servers. No laughter from the corner desk where someone always forgot to mute their mic. The entire East Wing stood hollow, desks stripped bare, monitors gone, chairs missing. Even the plants Elena insisted on keeping alive were gone, leaving pale outlines on the carpet like shadows of a life that had been removed too quickly. She stood still, her bag slipping slightly from her shoulder, eyes scanning the space with the instinct of someone who had learned long ago that absence was rarely accidental. Someone had made a decision. Finley should have been there by now. So should the others. Elena took a step forward, heels echoing too loudly, and that was when she saw it. Her old office door stood open, flooded with light, newly occupied. A young man stood inside adjusting framed certificates on the wall with ceremonial care, as if blessing the room. Beside him hovered Marcus Hale, hands clasped behind his back, smiling the smile of a man watching his own future unfold. Julian Cross had arrived. Marcus noticed Elena at last and clapped his hands once, sharp and eager. Perfect timing. He spoke as though nothing unusual had happened, as though teams did not vanish overnight. Elena, meet Julian. Our new strategic productivity lead. Julian did not turn. He continued aligning his awards, each one polished, each one loud. Efficiency innovation, systems disruption, future of work. Elena nodded slowly. Her gaze flicked past them to the empty desks beyond the glass walls. And my team. Marcus waved a hand, temporary relocation. Just until we finalize restructuring, Julian needs space. His process requires focus. Focus. Elena repeated the word silently as something colder settled in her chest. She did not raise her voice. She did not argue. She had learned long ago that outrage wasted oxygen. Instead, she turned and walked back toward the elevator, her reflection following her in the mirrored walls, calm and unreadable. The ride down felt longer than it should have. When the doors opened to the lower levels, the air changed. Cooler, damp industrial line. She followed the signs past storage rooms and maintenance corridors until she found a paper notice taped crookedly to a metal door. Systems Analysis Unit. Inside, her team sat shoulder to shoulder at folding tables, extension cords tangled like roots across the concrete floor, overhead pipes sweated steadily into a plastic bucket. The lighting flickered just enough to make headaches inevitable. No one spoke at first. Finley finally looked up. Her jaw was tight, eyes sharp with humiliation barely held in check. He said we had 30 minutes. Movers were already waiting. Others stared at their screens, pretending to work. A coping mechanism. Elena recognized it immediately. She had seen it before in places where people learned to survive by staying useful. A younger analyst clenched his fists. Years here. Years. And we get buried. Elena listened. She always did. She took in the smell of metal and dust, the hunched shoulders, the quiet fury vibrating under the surface. Somewhere above them, Julian Cross was arranging symbols of borrowed success in a sunlit office that once belonged to her. She smiled. It was not the smile of surrender. It was the smile of calculation. Pack what matters, she said gently. Not just for today. Everything you would not want to lose if this place disappeared tomorrow. They looked at her, confused, searching her face for anger and finding none. Trust me, Elena added. And do it quietly. She did not tell them that she had already seen this moment coming. That when Marcus Hale arrived preaching reinvention and ignoring history, she had begun preparing for impact. That the real power in any organization did not sit in corner offices or glossy presentations, but in memory, data, and relationships that could not be relocated to a basement. Above them, Northvale Dynamics believed it had moved a problem out of sight. What it had actually done was give Elena Ward exactly the darkness she needed to see clearly. And somewhere in the building, without realizing it, the people who thought they had won had already begun to lose. They were not supposed to be here. That was the unspoken truth hanging in the basement air, heavier than the damp concrete smell, heavier than the slow drip of water from the pipes overhead. In the eyes of the company above them, the people in this room were excess, replaceable, conveniently forgotten. Yet every one of them knew that without them, nothing upstairs truly worked. The woman at the center of the room understood this more clearly than anyone, Manigres. She did not need to say it aloud. She could read it in the way shoulders hunched, in the way fingers hovered over keyboards as if work itself were a shield. She could hear it in the silences between sentences, where pride and humiliation collided. She watched them the way she always had, not as a manager counting output, but as a strategist reading terrain. The senior engineer sat nearest the wall, posture rigid, jaw locked. Her communication style had always been blunt, too honest for executives who preferred polished ambiguity. She had been passed over repeatedly until someone finally saw past the sharp edges and into the architecture of her mind. In the basement light, her anger burned quietly, not reckless, but focused. She did not fear hard work. She feared being wasted. Across from her, the youngest analyst kept his eyes on the screen, scrolling through code he could write in his sleep. Fresh out of school, brilliant, intuitive, and still carrying the unspoken doubt of someone who had been told too many times that potential was not the same as value. His hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from restraint. He wanted to ask why. He did not yet know that the answer would not help him. Near the corner, the oldest member of the team adjusted his glasses and leaned back in his chair. Decades of experience had taught him how organizations really worked. He had seen cycles of praise and neglect, innovation and collapse. Retirement had been a thought once. Then she had asked him to stay. Not because she needed a title on paper, but because she knew systems failed when memory walked out the door. In this basement, he felt the familiar ache of betrayal, sharp and personal. Others filled the room with quieter forms of resistance. One tested security protocols that no one else could breach. Another translated complexity into clarity, the invisible bridge between departments that never received credit. A tester whose methods had become standards elsewhere now sat beneath leaking pipes, documenting flaws no one upstairs would read. They were not flashy. They were essential. The woman listened to them without interrupting. She had learned long ago that people revealed the most when they believed they were merely venting. She absorbed every word, every shift in tone. Beneath the frustration, beneath the disbelief, there was something else forming. Fear. Not fear of work. Fear of insignificance. Someone finally broke the quiet. How did it happen so fast? No one answered. They all knew the surface explanation. A new leader, a new philosophy, a man with smooth confidence and louder promises. What they did not yet see was the deeper mechanism at work. The instinct of insecure leadership to replace substance with spectacle. The woman stepped forward then, and the room leaned toward her without realizing it. She did not raise her voice. She never did. Authority, real authority, did not need volume. What happened today was not about performance, she said. It was about perception. They looked at her now, truly looking, as if waiting for permission to feel what they already felt. You were not moved because you failed, she continued. You were moved because you do not advertise yourselves. You solve problems, quietly, reliably. That makes people who need applause uncomfortable. The youngest analyst frowned. So, what do we do? The question landed heavier than he intended. It carried resignation disguised as curiosity. The woman did not answer immediately. She walked slowly between the tables, fingers brushing the backs of chairs, eyes scanning screens. This was not theater. This was assessment. She had chosen each of them carefully over the years, not for brilliance alone, though there was plenty of that. She chose for endurance, for judgment under pressure, for the ability to keep moving when recognition vanished. Before this company hired her, she had coordinated logistics in places where failure meant more than missed deadlines. She had learned how systems broke under stress and how people either rose or collapsed when stripped of comfort. She had learned that the most dangerous mistakes were made by those desperate to look important. She stopped in the center of the room. "We do our work," she said, perfectly quietly, "and we remember everything." A few exchanged glances, not understanding yet, but trusting. They always did. Trust had been built here not with speeches, but with consistency. What she did not say was that this basement was not an ending. It was a signal. A final confirmation of something she had suspected since the day the new leader spoke of transformation without once mentioning the people who had carried the company through its hardest years. Above them, decisions were being made by those who mistook confidence for competence. Below them, something else was taking shape. Not rebellion, not revenge. Preparation. And though none of them knew it yet, the moment they were pushed into the dark was the moment their true leverage began to surface. The email arrived before sunrise, and it changed everything. It was brief, mandatory department assembly, executive floor, immediate attendance, no agenda, no explanation. In the basement, the message spread silently from screen to screen, shoulders stiffened, hands paused mid-keystroke. The unspoken fear was familiar. When leadership summoned without context, it was never to listen. The woman read the message once, then again, already hearing what it did not say. This was not about them, not yet. This was about spectacle. Upstairs, the building had begun rehearsing its new reality. They gathered in the glass auditorium just after the city woke. Sunlight flooded the room, sharp and unforgiving, bouncing off steel and marble. Executives filled the first rows, polished and alert. Middle managers clustered behind them, smiling too quickly, eager to be seen agreeing. At the center of it all stood the man who had taken their space. He moved like someone accustomed to attention. Tall, confident, dressed in a tailored suit that caught the light just enough to demand it. He smiled as if the room belonged to him already. The woman and her team stood at the back. That was deliberate. The new leader stepped forward, voice smooth, measured, amplified just enough to sound important without sounding strained. "Today marks the beginning of transformation," he said. "A recalibration of how we think about productivity, value, and the future of work." Slides bloomed behind him in a cascade of color and arrows, growth curves, efficiency metrics, promises shaped like certainty. The team watched in silence. The youngest analyst leaned forward, eyes narrowing. The numbers were impressive. Too impressive. Projections soared without friction, no dependencies, no constraints, no acknowledgement of the systems beneath them. It was a story told by someone who had never stayed late to fix what broke after applause faded. The senior engineer crossed her arms. She had seen this pattern before. Confidence without comprehension. Vocabulary mistaken for vision. After the older technician shifted uncomfortably. He knew what came next. He had watched companies chase this illusion until something vital snapped. The woman stood still, hands folded, expression neutral. She felt the room more than she saw it. The rising excitement, the relief of executives eager to believe, the quiet dread of those who understood the cost. Then came the moment she had been waiting for. Questions. A board member raised a hand. "How will this integrate with existing systems?" The man smiled wider, seamlessly. "Our methodology is platform agnostic." The woman's gaze sharpened. That word, agnostic, it meant nothing here. Another voice. "What contingencies exist if adoption slows?" "Momentum drives adoption," he replied smoothly. "Resistance fades when results appear." The woman saw it then. Not arrogance, fear, the kind that hid behind certainty. She felt it ripple through her team as well. The realization that the emperor was not just unprepared, he was guessing. The new leader pressed on, clicking through slides faster now. His words accelerated. Transformation, disruption, optimization. The woman shifted her weight slightly. That was enough. She stepped forward. It was subtle. Most did not notice at first, but her presence changed the room, not loudly, precisely. The kind of shift people felt before they understood it. "Excuse me," she said. The microphone caught her voice, calm and steady. The room stilled. She did not introduce herself. She did not need to. Those who mattered already knew who she was, even if they had forgotten why. "You mentioned integration," she continued, eyes on the man at the front. "Could you clarify how your framework handles legacy dependency chains during peak load conditions?" Silence. The man blinked once. Then again, he opened his mouth, closed it. The woman waited. Seconds stretched. The air tightened. "Well," he began, "we typically address those scenarios post-deployment." "Post-deployment," she repeated softly. A few heads turned. So there is no mitigation during transition, she asked. No rollback protocol, no data integrity assurance when throughput spikes. His confidence fractured just slightly. But enough. We adapt in real time, he said, voice thinning. The woman nodded as if confirming something for herself. She stepped back into place. That was the twist. She had not challenged him to expose him. She had challenged him to reveal himself. Around her, her team felt it land. The quiet shift from doubt to clarity, from fear to understanding. This man did not own the future. He was borrowing language he did not understand, selling certainty he could not deliver. Above them, executives exchanged glances. Unease crept in. The applause that followed was thinner, delayed, uncertain. The presentation ended, but something essential had broken. As the room emptied, the woman watched the man at the front gather his notes, jaw tight, smile gone. She saw the new leader approach him, whisper urgently. She also saw something else, eyes turning toward her, questions forming, memory stirring. She led her team back toward the elevator without a word. The ride down was silent, but the silence was different now, charged, focused. In the basement, the pipes still dripped, the lights still flickered. Nothing had changed on the surface. Everything had changed underneath. The woman allowed herself a single breath of satisfaction, then let it go. This was not the victory. This was the signal. And now, finally, the game had begun. The relocation notice came without warning, without apology, without even the courtesy of a signature. Effective immediately. Space optimization initiative. Temporary operational adjustment. 3 sentences. Enough to fracture morale. The message appeared on screens just after lunch, timed with surgical precision. Not early enough to invite discussion. Not late enough to be ignored. The kind of decision designed to feel inevitable. In the basement, the woman read it once and felt nothing. Then she read it again and felt everything. Around her, reactions bloomed in fragments. A sharp exhale. A chair pushed back too hard. Someone laughed, a brittle sound that collapsed into silence almost immediately. The room absorbed it all, the concrete walls excellent at holding disappointment. They were being moved again, not upward, not sideways. Further in, closer to the building's mechanical core. Fewer outlets, no windows at all this time. The message framed it as efficiency, as alignment, as progress. It was none of those things. The woman closed her laptop slowly. She could sense the questions forming before they were spoken. How much worse could it get? How far down could they be pushed? When did endurance become complicity? She did not speak yet. Instead, she watched. The senior engineer paced, short steps, anger sharp but controlled. Her mind was already cataloging failures. This would introduce heat variance, power instability, security blind spots, problems no one upstairs would notice until something critical broke. The youngest analyst stared at the screen, unread, resignation letter minimized in the corner. His shoulders sagged, then squared again. Hope did not leave all at once. It eroded. The older technician said nothing at all. Silence was his protest. He had learned long ago that when organizations stopped listening, words became liabilities. Others reacted in smaller ways. A tester quietly backed up files to an external drive. A systems specialist began exporting logs, hands steady, expression unreadable. Instincts honed in environments where preparation mattered more than permission. The woman finally spoke. "They are not moving us because of space," she said, heads turned. "They are moving us because of visibility." Her voice was calm, but it cut cleanly through the noise. She let the words settle, then continued. "When you cannot control outcomes, you control narratives. When you cannot outperform people, you isolate them." She paused, met each gaze in turn. This is not punishment. It is fear. That was the twist. Not the revelation that they were undervalued. They had known that. It was the realization that someone upstairs had noticed the crack in the illusion and was trying to seal it by burying the evidence. The woman felt the shift ripple through the room. Anger gave way to something sharper. Understanding. She gestured toward the screens, the cables, the battered tables. "They think this limits us," she said. "It does not. It clarifies us." She began to move, slow and deliberate, as if mapping the room with her presence. "From now on, everything changes. We document everything, not just what we build, but what breaks. Every delay, every workaround, every moment where reality diverges from the story being told above us." The youngest analyst looked up. "You mean audits?" She smiled faintly. "I mean memory. That landed harder. She explained without dramatics how decisions left trails, how systems told the truth if you knew where to look, how silence could be louder than protest if structured correctly. They listened because she never wasted their time. She did not tell them that she had already begun reaching outward, that calls were being returned faster than expected, that old allies remembered her not for titles, but for outcomes delivered under pressure. She did not tell them that the building above them was not the only one watching. Later that afternoon, as they prepared to relocate once more, she took a call in the corridor. Her voice low, measured, respectful. Yes, she said, I am aware of the risks. No, I am not asking yet. I am preparing. When she returned, the team was already packing, quieter than before, more precise. No one asked questions. They did not need to. The new space was worse, deeper, hotter, the air stale with neglect. The lights hummed like tired insects. It felt final, as if someone had tried to erase them completely. The woman stood in the doorway for a long moment before stepping inside. She thought of places she had worked where resources were scarce and consequences immediate, where leaders were revealed not by speeches, but by what they protected when it cost them something. This company had just revealed itself. She gathered the team once more, voice steady, eyes clear. They believe this is the end of our relevance, she said. They believe pressure will break us or drive us away quietly. She shook her head once. They do not understand what they have done. The room listened. They have concentrated us. They have stripped away distraction. They have given us nothing to lose except our silence. She met their eyes one by one, and silence, she said, is a choice. The pipes rattled overhead. The lights flickered. Somewhere above them, decisions were being finalized, careers reshuffled, confidence reassured. Below, something far more dangerous was forming. Not rebellion, alignment. And this time, it would not stay buried. The first system failed at dawn. Not loudly, not spectacularly. It failed the way dangerous things always did, quietly, behind dashboards no one checked anymore. In the deeper basement, the woman noticed it immediately. A latency spike, minor on the surface, invisible to leadership reports. But to her, it was a tremor running through a structure already under strain. She said nothing at first. She watched. She let the data speak. Around her, the team worked with a new kind of discipline. No complaints, no wasted motion. The pressure had burned away everything unnecessary. They moved like people who understood that this was no longer about survival, it was about leverage. The senior engineer flagged a cascade risk before it appeared. The tester documented a failure path that had never existed before the relocation. The older technician traced a dependency no one upstairs remembered was still alive. Each discovery went into the archive. The woman had quietly ordered them to build, time-stamped, cross-referenced, impossible to dismiss later. Above them, the narrative remained intact. The new leader toured conference rooms. Speaking of momentum and buy-in, executives nodded, slides were shared, applause was scheduled. Below, reality disagreed. By mid-morning, the youngest analyst noticed something else. External access logs, subtle, repeated. Someone outside the organization was probing endpoints that should have been dormant. He froze. Then he looked up at her. She was already at his side. "Show me," she said. He did. Her eyes moved quickly, connecting threads faster than the screen could refresh. The probes were not random. They were testing for weaknesses introduced by the relocation, power reroutes, network extensions, temporary fixes made permanent without review. She felt a familiar, cold clarity settle in. Someone out there knew exactly where to look. That was the second twist. This was not just internal incompetence anymore. It was exposure. She ordered the team into quiet motion, no alerts, no escalations. They mapped the intrusion, contained it, sealed it, all without triggering the automated systems that would have sent sanitized summaries upstairs. When it was done, the room exhaled as one. The youngest analyst swallowed. "Should we report this?" She met his eyes. Not yet. That answer carried weight. It was not secrecy, it was timing. Later that afternoon, she stepped into the corridor and made another call. Her tone was professional, unemotional, familiar. "Yes," she said. "It is worse than I expected." "No, I am not surprised." "You were right to worry." She listened, nodded once. "I will send you the documentation off record." For now. When she returned, the team did not ask who was on the other end. They had learned that the most important moves happened before announcements. The day stretched on. More failures followed, small ones, accumulating, the kind that did not make headlines but hollowed systems from the inside. Upstairs, tension crept into meetings. Questions circled without landing. Why were metrics lagging? Why did projections wobble? Why did fixes take longer than promised? The new leader felt it first. Confidence gave way to irritation. Irritation to control, control to fear. He demanded updates. None came. The woman watched the dynamic unfold like a chessboard she had studied long before sitting down to play thing. She understood something he did not. Power did not belong to those who spoke the loudest. It belonged to those who held the truth when others needed it. That evening, as the building emptied, she gathered the team. They were tired, focused alive, in a way exhaustion could not erase. What we are seeing now, she said, is not collapse. It is exposure. She explained carefully how the relocation had created blind spots, how speed had replaced rigor, how leadership had chosen story over structure. They listened, not with anger, but with understanding. The older technician nodded slowly. So what happens next? She did not answer immediately. Instead, she told them something she had never shared before, about places she had worked where systems failed and consequences followed fast, about how the most dangerous moment was not the failure itself, but the denial afterward. They are going to look for someone to blame, she said, and they will not look upward. Silence followed. Then the senior engineer spoke, and when they do, the woman's expression softened, just slightly. We will be ready. She assigned roles, documentation verification, containment. No heroics, no shortcuts, everything clean, everything precise. As they dispersed, the youngest analyst lingered hands. He hesitated, then asked the question that had been building since the first basement. Why are you doing this? She considered him for a long moment. Because one day, she said, you will be in a room where someone tries to convince you that your value is optional. And I want you to remember this moment. He nodded, understanding more than she expected. When the lights dimmed and the pipes hummed, the woman remained alone for a moment. She opened her laptop and reviewed the growing archive. Patterns were emerging now, clear damning. Somewhere outside the building, someone else was reading similar data. She closed the screen. The company still believed this was about space. It was about to learn it was about truth. And truth, once assembled, could not be relocated out of sight. The summons came at night, not as an invitation, but as an instruction. Executive review. Mandatory attendance. Tomorrow morning. No sender name. No context, just authority disguised as procedure. In the basement, the woman read it under flickering light and felt the weight of timing settle into place. They had waited too long to stay invisible. Now the system was reacting. Around her, the team sensed the shift immediately. People who lived inside data learned to recognize pressure before it announced itself. Conversations slowed, screens dimmed. The youngest analyst swallowed hard, then straightened his back as if preparing for impact. They want answers, he said. She nodded. Not answers, control. The hours before dawn stretched thin. No one left early, no one spoke much. The senior engineer double-checked documentation she had already verified twice. The older technician annotated dependency maps with a precision that bordered on reverence. This was not fear. This was readiness. When morning came, the woman dressed carefully. The same charcoal suit, the same calm. She did not dress for approval. She dressed for memory. The executive floor smelled different. Polished wood, filtered air, confidence curated into architecture. The boardroom doors closed behind her with a soft click that sounded final. They sat around the table already. Executives, legal operations. The new leader at the center, jaw tight, hands clasped too firmly. He looked relieved to see her. That was the first sign. Thank you for coming on short notice. An executive began. We are experiencing some inconsistencies in system performance. Inconsistencies. The word hovered, careful and bloodless. The woman listened without interrupting. She let them speak themselves into corners, projections not aligning, latency spikes, external exposure concerns, questions about relocation impact. Finally, they turned to her. You have been closest to these systems, someone said. What is your assessment? This was the moment they expected her to flinch, to hedge, to protect herself by minimizing what she knew. She did neither. The relocation compromised system integrity, she said evenly. Power reroutes introduced instability. Network extensions increased exposure. Temporary fixes became permanent without oversight. Silence followed. The new leader leaned forward. Why was this not escalated? She met his gaze without blinking. It was contained, properly quietly, to prevent public impact. His voice sharpened. That was not your call. That was the twist they did not see coming. It was, she replied. According to Protocol Subsection 8, operational containment takes precedence over executive notification when escalation risks compounding failure. Legal shifted in their seats. Someone reached for a tablet. She continued, calm and precise. I documented every incident, time-stamped, verified. The archive is complete. She slid a drive across the table. This was not defiance. This was evidence. The room changed. Executives exchanged glances. The confidence that had carried the new leader this far cracked audibly. He had expected incompetence or resistance. He had not expected preparation. Why were we not informed sooner? An executive asked. Because no one asked the right questions, she said quietly. The room stiffened. You asked for momentum, for transformation. You rewarded speed over structure. When risk appeared, it was absorbed by the people you moved out of sight. The words were not loud. They did not need to be. The youngest executive cleared his throat. Are you saying this is our fault? She paused, chose her words with care. I am saying systems reflect the values imposed on them. That landed. The new leader's composure fractured completely. He leaned back, crossed his arms. This feels like an ambush. She looked at him then, really looked at him, and for the first time, there was no calculation in her eyes. Only clarity. No, she said. This is accountability. The meeting adjourned without resolution. They asked for time. They always did when power shifted unexpectedly. As she left the room, she felt it, eyes following her, not dismissive now. Evaluating back in the basement, the team waited. She told them everything, not dramatized, not softened, just truth. The senior engineer exhaled slowly. So now they know. They know we exist, she replied. That is not the same as knowing our value. The youngest analyst frowned. What happens next? She considered the question. This was the moment where leadership either became protection or prophecy. They will try to contain this, she said, to isolate responsibility, to offer incentives to stay quiet. The older technician nodded. They always do. She met their eyes. We do not respond to fear with fear. We respond with integrity. She outlined the next phase. Continued documentation. Continued excellence. No leaks. No shortcuts. Let the system speak louder than any accusation. That night, as the team dispersed, she stayed behind alone. She opened her laptop and reviewed the archive once more. Patterns were undeniable. Now, decisions traced cleanly to outcomes. Names attached. She closed the screen. The company believed this meeting was about performance. It was about ownership. And soon, they would have to decide who truly carried the weight of what they had built. Above her, the lights of the executive floor burned late. Below, the foundation held steady. And the woman who had been pushed into the dark was no longer waiting. She was setting terms. The offer arrived before the apology. It came quietly, folded into a calendar invite, disguised as a conversation about alignment and future opportunity. The woman read it once and felt the weight of the maneuver immediately. This was not reconciliation. This was containment. In the days after the executive review, the building had shifted, not visibly, not officially, but the air had changed. Doors closed more often. Conversations stopped when she passed. People who had once looked through her now looked toward her, and then away, uncertain where she stood in the new gravity. Upstairs, leadership scrambled to regain narrative control. Downstairs, the team kept working. They had expected retaliation. Instead, they received attention. Carefully curated, strategically flattering, the senior engineer received a private message praising her technical insight and inviting her to advise on a transformation task force. The tester was asked to fast-track a report for executive visibility. The youngest analyst was offered mentorship from someone who had never noticed him before. Divide and soften. Classic. The woman gathered them that evening. She did not accuse. She asked questions. Who contacted you? What was promised? What was implied? They told her everything. The youngest analyst looked ashamed. I did not agree to anything. She nodded. You did not do anything wrong. She explained slowly, deliberately, as if teaching a language that would one day save them. When systems are threatened, they attempt to isolate the variables they cannot control. They do not confront power directly. They dilute it. The older technician leaned back, understanding dawning in his eyes. They want to separate us. She nodded. And they want me grateful. The next morning, she went upstairs. The meeting took place in a small executive conference room overlooking the city. The view was intentional, elevation as persuasion. The new leader smiled when she entered, less confident than before, more careful. "We appreciate your professionalism during a challenging period," he began. "We want to make sure talent is recognized." She waited. "We are creating a new advisory role," he continued. "Strategic oversight, direct access, influence without operational burden. A promotion without power." He slid a document across the table. The compensation was generous, the language flattering, the responsibilities vague. She read it slowly. This would remove her from the basement, from the team, from the archive. She looked up. "And what happens to my unit?" He hesitated. "Integration will be phased. Naturally, some restructuring will occur. Naturally." That was the moment. She smiled, softly, politely. The smile of someone who had already decided. "I will need time to consider," she said. "Of course," he replied quickly. "We would like to move forward soon." She left without signing. In the elevator, she felt the familiar clarity settle in. They were not offering advancement. They were offering silence. That afternoon, the external call came. A number she had not seen in years, one she had hoped would stay dormant until needed. She stepped into the corridor. "I was wondering when you would call." The voice on the other end said, "I have been watching the signals." She closed her eyes briefly. "So have I." They spoke in shorthand. Shared context built over decades of navigating systems that failed people quietly. The woman listened more than she spoke. "There is interest," the voice said. "Not just curiosity, concern. What you are documenting has implications beyond your building." She understood immediately. Exposure always rippled outward. "I am not asking yet," she said. "You will not have to," the voice replied. "When the time comes, you will be invited." That was the third twist. She returned to the basement and told the team only what they needed to know. Not details, direction. "We stay together," she said. "No individual agreements, no side doors." The senior engineer nodded. "Let them keep offering." The youngest analyst exhaled. Relief visible. "I was worried I was the only one who felt uncomfortable." "You were not," the woman said. Discomfort is information. The days that followed were a study in pressure. Executives circled. Offers sharpened. Deadlines appeared where none had existed before. Performance metrics were redefined midstream. The team did not react. They documented. They delivered. They waited. One evening, as the city lights flickered on above them, the woman stood alone for a moment, watching her team work. They had been pushed, isolated, tested. They had not fractured. She thought of the advisory role waiting upstairs, the office with windows, the relief of distance. She closed her eyes. Leadership was not about elevation. It was about refusal. When she reopened them, she knew the next move would not be hers alone. The system had reached a point where it would reveal itself, one way or another. The company believed it was negotiating. It was already too late for that, because the truth they were trying to contain was no longer held by one person. It lived in a network, and networks, once aligned, did not need permission to act. The message did not come through corporate channels. It arrived encrypted, time-stamped, and unmistakably intentional. A meeting request, off-site, confidential. No intermediaries. The woman read it twice, then closed her laptop without replying. In the basement, the team sensed the change before she said anything. It was not tension this time. It was anticipation, the kind that tightened posture and sharpened focus. They had crossed a threshold. For weeks, pressure had moved in predictable patterns. Internal offers, quiet flattery, manufactured urgency, all attempts to pull pieces off the board one by one. None had worked. This was different. She gathered them late that afternoon, after most of the building had emptied and the hum of machinery grew louder than office noise. "An external party has requested a conversation," she said. "No names. No embellishment." The youngest analyst's breath caught Arthindi. "Is this about recruitment?" She shook her head slightly. "It is about risk." The senior engineer's eyes narrowed. "That is worse, and better," the woman replied. She explained what she could, that the documentation they had assembled had not stayed contained, that when systems destabilized, others who depended on them noticed, that concern had a way of traveling faster than blame. They listened in silence. The older technician spoke last. So we are not invisible anymore. No, she said, we are visible enough to be dangerous. The meeting took place the next morning in a building that did not advertise itself. No logo, no reception desk, just clean lines and deliberate quiet, the kind of place built for discretion. She arrived alone. The room was spare, a table, 2 chairs, a window overlooking the city from a distance that felt intentional, neither dominant nor submissive. The person who entered did not smile. "Thank you for coming," the stranger said, sitting opposite her. "Your time is valuable. So is yours," she replied. They did not exchange names. "We have been monitoring system irregularities across several partners." The stranger began. "Your organization appears repeatedly in our analyses." The woman did not react. "We noticed containment where escalation was expected." The stranger continued. "Quiet corrections, documentation without notification. That is unusual." "It is responsible," she said. "Sometimes," the stranger replied, "responsibility creates risk." That was the opening. They spoke for nearly an hour. About architecture, about incentives, about how organizations failed, not because of lack of intelligence, but because intelligence was isolated until it broke. The stranger slid a folder across the table. Inside was not an offer. It was a framework, a proposal to build something new. Independent, properly resourced, shielded from the politics she had just survived. You would have autonomy, the stranger said, and the ability to bring those you trust. The woman closed the folder gently. "And my current team." The stranger met her gaze. "All of them." That was the twist. Not extraction migration. She felt the weight of it settle in her chest. Relief, fear, responsibility. All at once. "I cannot accept without them," she said. "And I will not accept if this becomes leverage against where we are now." The stranger nodded once. "We are not interested in collapse. We are interested in continuity." She left without signing anything. Back in the basement, she told the team what mattered and nothing more. "There is an option. It is real. It is not urgent." The youngest analyst sat heavily in his chair. "They want all of us." "Yes." The senior engineer exhaled slowly. "Then they already understand what this place does not." The older technician smiled faintly. "Took them long enough." But celebration did not follow. This was not rescue, it was choice. "What if this triggers retaliation?" someone asked quietly. "It will," the woman said. "But not in the way you think." She explained what came next. How external interests changed internal behavior. How leadership would accelerate. How pressure would spike before it broke. They listened, absorbing the implications. "We do nothing different," she said finally. "We keep documenting. We keep delivering. We do not signal intention." The youngest analyst nodded. "Let them guess." That evening she stood alone again, reviewing the archive. Patterns now extended beyond the building. Connections she had suspected were confirmed. She sent one message, brief, controlled. "Not yet. But prepare." When she shut down her laptop, she felt something unfamiliar. Not fear, not triumph, momentum. The company still believed it was managing a situation. It did not yet understand that an alternative future had been drafted elsewhere with its most critical people already written into it. And when the time came, the choice would not be between staying or leaving. It would be between adapting or being left behind. The decision did not come from the board. It came from the hallway. The woman noticed it in the way conversations fractured when she approached, in the sudden urgency of meetings that excluded her name, in the quiet recalibration of power happening without announcement. Leadership was no longer debating whether there was a problem. They were debating how to survive it. Inside the basement, the team felt it too. Pressure had changed direction. It no longer pressed down. It closed in from the sides. She gathered them late in the evening, when the building had emptied and the mechanical hum was louder than human voices. "We are entering the most dangerous phase," she said. No one interrupted. When systems realize they cannot suppress truth, they attempt to fracture the people holding it. The senior engineer frowned. "Divide and conquer." She nodded. "Except this time, they will disguise it as choice." The offers arrived the next day, not all at once, not publicly, carefully sequenced. A private message to the senior engineer proposing a leadership role in a new innovation pod. Autonomy, resources, visibility. A direct email to the older technician suggesting a consulting arrangement with reduced hours and increased compensation. Respect framed as relief. A conversation request for the youngest analyst from a vice president who suddenly saw his potential and wanted to accelerate his trajectory. The woman was offered nothing. That was the signal. She listened as they told her, one by one. She watched their faces as they described the words used: growth, recognition, opportunity, and beneath it all, the unspoken condition: separate. The youngest analyst spoke last. His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed the weight of it. They said, "I could make a real impact upstairs." "You already do," she replied. He swallowed. "I know, I just needed to hear it." She did not tell them what to do. Instead, she told them the truth. "These offers are not about your future," she said. "They are about containing risk. You are being measured not by your value, but by how easily you can be removed from alignment." The older technician leaned back slowly. "So what is the play?" She took a breath. This was the moment where leadership stopped being protection and became consequence. "We do not reject the offers outright," she said, "and we do not accept them blindly." They looked at her, surprised. "We respond with one condition," she continued. "Transparency. Everything discussed is shared, no side agreements, no private leverage." The senior engineer's eyes lit with understanding. "They will hate that." "Yes," the woman said, "because it removes their advantage." The next 48 hours were surgical. Each team member responded politely, interested, open, curious, and each included the same clause. Any role or transition would require continuity of the existing unit, shared accountability, and documented operational safeguards. The responses were immediate. Confusion, delays, escalations. Executives were not accustomed to collective negotiation from people they believed isolated. Meetings multiplied, agendas blurred, authority bounced between departments like a dropped object no one wanted to claim. The woman was finally summoned. This time, it was not framed as opportunity, it was framed as concern. "We are worried you are influencing others to resist growth," an executive said, carefully neutral. She did not raise her voice, she did not deny it. "I am influencing them to think," she replied. That was the fourth twist. They expected defiance or apology. They did not expect alignment. "This is becoming disruptive," another executive added. "There are concerns about loyalty." "Loyalty to what?" she asked quietly. "To the company or to the illusion you have built around it?" Silence. She leaned forward slightly, just enough to signal intent. "You created this fracture when you chose optics over structure," she said. "I did not invent the consequences, I documented them." The meeting ended badly. Threats were implied, language sharpened, timelines appeared. When she returned to the basement, the team waited. They could see it on her face. The moment had passed. The point of no return crossed. The youngest analyst spoke first. "Are we about to be forced to choose?" She looked at them. Really looked at them. "No," she said. "They are." She explained the final piece, the external framework, the migration path. Not an escape, but a continuation. The senior engineer laughed once. Sharp and incredulous, "So we become the variable they cannot control." "Yes." The older technician nodded slowly. "About time." The room grew quiet as the implications settled. This was no longer about careers. It was about authorship. That night, the woman stayed late, alone. She opened the archive and watched the story assemble itself with brutal clarity. Decisions, incentives, failures, names. She did not feel anger. She felt responsibility. By morning, leadership would be split. Some would push to cut losses. Others would push to retain control. No one would agree. That was the point. The company believed it was facing a retention problem. What it was actually facing was a reckoning. And for the first time since the basement doors closed behind them, the woman allowed herself one quiet certainty. They were no longer reacting. They were shaping the outcome. The board meeting was moved up overnight. No explanation, no negotiation, just a revised calendar and a single line beneath it. Full attendance required. The woman read the message in the basement and understood immediately. This was not a discussion. This was a reckoning disguised as governance. By the time morning arrived, the building felt hollowed out. Elevators ran quieter, security lingered longer, people spoke in fragments, as if every sentence might be overheard and repurposed. She walked into the executive floor with her team behind her, not because they had been invited, but because they had decided they would no longer wait to be summoned. The boardroom was already full. Directors in tailored suits, legal counsel with tablets ready, Executives arranged like chess pieces that had lost track of the game. The new leader sat near the center, posture rigid, face set in something between confidence and defiance. He did not look at her. The chair cleared his throat. We are here to address escalating operational risk and internal instability. Internal instability. The woman waited. Slides appeared, charts, summaries, carefully cropped narratives, a story that bent just enough to avoid breaking. Then the chair looked at her. You have been central to recent developments. We would like your perspective. She stood. She did not bring slides. She did not bring rhetoric. She brought truth. Before I speak, she said, I need the room to understand one thing. What you are calling instability is not disruption, it is exposure. A murmur moved through the table. She gestured once and her team began distributing documents, not opinions, records. Time-stamped logs, dependency maps, incident trails that led cleanly from decision to consequence. The youngest director frowned, flipping pages. These figures suggest a significant drop in resilience after the relocation. The woman nodded, because resilience was never part of the plan. The new leader finally looked at her. That is not fair. She met his gaze without heat. It is precise. She continued, voice steady. You rewarded speed without verification. You isolated critical systems without understanding their interdependence. When failure appeared, you called it resistance. Silence tightened. Legal shifted. The chair leaned forward. Are you alleging mismanagement? She did not hesitate. I am documenting it. That was the moment. Not accusation, documentation. The new leader stood abruptly. This is a coordinated attack. You have been planning this. She turned to him fully now. You are right. The room stilled. I have been planning continuity, she said. From the moment this organization chose optics over structure. She paused, then delivered the final turn. What you have not been told is that these same records have been independently reviewed. External auditors, partners who depend on these systems, they noticed the same patterns. Heads snapped up, the chair stiffened. External review was not authorized. She nodded once. Failure does not wait for authorization. The board dissolved into motion. Questions layered over one another. Who had access? Who had shared data? Who knew? The woman remained still. This is not about punishment. Yet, she said when the noise subsided, it is about correction. And that requires acknowledging who has been carrying the risk and who has been insulated from it. The senior director spoke carefully. What are you proposing? She looked back at her team, then to the board. Structural change, immediate leadership accountability, restoration of operational autonomy to the people who understand these systems, and a formal partnership with external oversight to prevent this from happening again. The new leader laughed, sharp and brittle. You are asking us to dismantle our own authority, she answered softly. I am asking you to preserve what remains of it. The chair closed his eyes briefly. After a long moment, he spoke. We will need to deliberate. Yep. Of course, she said. You should. They were asked to leave the room. In the corridor, her team waited. No one spoke. They did not need reassurance. They had already crossed the line where outcome mattered less than integrity. Hours passed. When the door finally opened, the chair stepped out alone. The board has accepted the findings, he said. There will be changes, effective immediately. He looked at her. We would like you to lead the transition. She did not smile. I will coordinate it, she replied. Leadership must be distributed. He nodded slowly, as you wish. Back in the basement, later that evening, the team sat together in the same harsh light where this had begun. The youngest analyst broke the silence. Did we win? The woman considered the question. No, she said. We were acknowledged. That was enough. Above them, the company would issue statements, reassurances, carefully worded commitments. Below, something more durable had formed. They had taken authorship of the system that once tried to erase them. And for the first time, the basement no longer felt like a place of exile. It felt like a foundation. The termination notice was issued before noon, and it was not addressed to her. It was addressed to the illusion. By the time the email reached the wider company, the name everyone expected to see was gone, replaced by language so neutral it almost sounded merciful. Leadership transition. Strategic realignment. Immediate effect. And the woman read it once and closed her eyes. Around her, the team waited. They had learned not to celebrate early. In systems like this, consequences never landed all at once. They rippled. Above them, offices were being emptied, security badges deactivated, calendars wiped clean. The new leader's authority evaporated faster than it had arrived. He did not say goodbye, but something else happened at the same time. Offers arrived, not invitations this time. Decisions. The senior engineer was offered a permanent role, restoring the architecture she had warned about for years. Real authority. Budget control. No conditions hidden in footnotes. The tester received confirmation that her protocols would become the company standard. Not suggested, required. The older technician was asked to lead continuity planning across divisions. His experience, once dismissed as outdated, suddenly framed as irreplaceable. The youngest analyst sat very still as his screen filled with messages, apologies disguised as praise that came too late. They looked at her. She felt the weight of it more than anyone, because she knew the final choice was not theirs alone. She gathered them that evening, not in the basement this time, but in a small, unused conference room halfway between the floors. Neutral ground, honest ground. They sat in a loose circle. No laptops, no screens, just faces. "You are being recognized now," she said. "That does not mean you are being understood." The senior engineer nodded slowly. "They want us back where they can see us." The older technician folded his hands and where they can forget what happened. The woman listened. She always did. The youngest analyst finally spoke. "I keep thinking about the other offer." No one reacted. They had known this was coming. She met his eyes. "And what do you feel when you think about it?" He hesitated. Safer but smaller. That answer landed. She took a breath. This was the moment she had been preparing them for without ever naming it. "What we decide next is not about loyalty," she said. "It is about leverage." She explained the full shape of what had been forming. Not an exit, not a coup, a split. Some would stay, not as symbols, as anchors, with real authority and safeguards written into structure, not promises. Others would go to build something parallel, independent, connected, but not captive. The room went silent. The senior engineer broke it with a short laugh. "We become our own redundancy." "Exactly." The older technician smiled. "Insurance," the youngest analyst leaned back, exhaling. "So no one ever gets pushed into a basement again." That was the heart of it. They discussed logistics, who stayed, who left, how knowledge would flow without violating trust, how autonomy could coexist with collaboration. The woman did not assign roles. They chose. When it was done, there were no speeches, no victory, just a quiet understanding that they had outgrown the frame that once confined them. Later that night, she stood alone by the window of the empty conference room, city lights flickering below. Her phone buzzed. The board chair. "We want you to take the director role permanently." The message read full authority, immediate. She typed her response carefully. "I will coordinate," she replied. "I will not consolidate." There was a pause. Then a reply. "Understood." That was the final twist. Power offered, not seized. Accepted, not hoarded. She returned to the team and told them. The senior engineer shook her head in disbelief. "You just turned down the title." The woman smiled faintly. "Titles expire. Structures last." In the days that followed, the basement emptied for the last time. Not in silence, in purpose. Equipment moved upward. Others moved outward. Systems stabilized. New ones began quietly without announcement. The company issued statements about resilience and learning. Investors were reassured. The market moved on. But inside the work, something had changed permanently. The woman walked through the building one last time before the transition completed. She passed the space where their desks had once been erased. She stopped. For a moment, she remembered the shock, the anger, the clarity that followed. Then she kept walking, because the real outcome was not the fall of a leader or the correction of a system. It was this. They were no longer waiting to be valued. They had learned how to build value that could not be buried. And wherever they went next, no one would ever mistake their silence for absence again. The first headline appeared before breakfast, and it got the story wrong. It spoke of restructuring, of decisive leadership, of a company that had corrected course just in time. It named no names. It never mentioned a basement. The woman read it quietly, standing by the window as morning light slipped between buildings. Somewhere below, the city moved on, unaware of how close one system had come to breaking itself apart. Inside the organization, life resumed with rehearsed normalcy. New charts replaced old ones. Updated values were printed and framed. People spoke the language of renewal with practiced confidence, but something irreversible had already happened. The team no longer worked in the same configuration. They had scattered by design, not by force. Some now operated openly within the company, embedded where decisions were made, shaping systems with authority written into structure. Others had crossed into a parallel space, building quietly, independently, no longer subject to internal amnesia. And the woman moved between them, not as a hero, not as a symbol, as a connector. She spent her days listening more than speaking, translating intention into architecture, memory into policy. When problems surfaced, they were addressed early, not buried. When pressure built, it was distributed, not deflected. People noticed, not the way they noticed promotions or failures. In smaller ways, in the absence of panic, in the fact that systems held when they should have collapsed, in the way meetings grew shorter and quieter because fewer things needed to be explained twice. One afternoon, the youngest analyst stood beside her in a newly renovated space that had once been an executive overflow room. "I still think about that basement," he said. She nodded. "Me too. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we had just left?" he asked. She considered the question. "Leaving would have solved the problem for us," she said. "Not for the system." He smiled faintly. "I do not think they understood that difference until it was too late. That was the final truth. The story most people told themselves was simple. A bad leader removed, a mistake corrected, stability restored. But the real transformation was quieter. It lived in the fact that no team would ever again be relocated without consequence. That data would outlive charisma. That silence, once understood, would never again be mistaken for compliance. Weeks later, she walked through the building one last time without purpose, without destination. She passed the space where the basement door had once closed behind them. The sign was gone now. The floor repurposed. She stopped only briefly. Not out of anger, out of acknowledgement. Pressure had revealed what mattered. Not the fall of an individual, but the rise of a standard. She stepped back into the light. Outside the company, the parallel effort had begun to attract attention. Quiet at first, then curious, then serious. Organizations asked questions they had not asked before. About resilience, about continuity, about what happened when people who carried institutional memory were removed from view. The woman never advertised what they had built. She did not need to. Those who recognized the pattern knew where to look, and those who did not were not ready yet. That night, as she prepared to leave, she received a message from someone she did not recognize. "I think I am being moved to a basement." It read. "Do you have advice?" She smiled, just slightly. She typed back a single line. "Pay attention to what breaks, then decide what you are willing to build." She shut down her phone and stepped into the evening. The city lights reflected off glass and steel, endless and indifferent systems everywhere, some fragile, some learning. The woman walked on, unremarkable to anyone passing by. That was the point. Because the most enduring power did not announce itself. It designed environments where fewer people were ever forced to fight for recognition in the first place. If this story felt familiar, if you have ever watched value pushed aside to make room for something louder and thinner, take a moment to reflect on where you stand now. Share your experience if you feel compelled to. And if stories like this matter to you, stay close. There are more systems worth examining and more quiet victories still unfolding.